Well, hello, denizens of the internet, and welcome back to Fascinating World. Okay, let's start right out here with our creed. We live in a fascinating world, and we are a part of it. The world is filled with so many amazing and awe-inspiring things, but we can miss them if we don't look for them. By searching for the good and the beautiful, the exciting and inspiring things going on in the world, we can reshape the lens through which we see the world itself, and we can learn to live in a sense of wonder and awe over this incredible world we live in. We live in a fascinating world, and we are part of it. Today, we resolve to see the wonder in being alive, and we commit to adding to it wherever we can. Okay, well, welcome back. So a couple of things for this episode. The first thing is yesterday I went to go see Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. And I'll be honest, I went in expecting to hate the movie. And I didn't. I actually thought it was a solid story, and it's way better than Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which I know is a low bar. I did have my headpiece to the Staff of Ra with me, just in case I needed to locate the Ark of the Covenant, but unfortunately that didn't come up, so I didn't need it. Okay, here's a brief non-spoiler plot summary. Indiana Jones is really old, but one time back when he was really young, he fought the Nazis, and while he was working with another archaeologist, he found this artifact called the Dial of Destiny. Things went poorly, and Indy ends up with only half of the device forgotten and locked away in an archival vault at his university. One day, his goddaughter, played by Phoebe Waller-Bridge, shows up, and she says she's trying to find the second half of the dial. He tries to talk her out of it. Mayhem ensues. Okay, so that's the plot of the movie. So here's some things that I really liked. The first 20 minutes or so of the film are the young Harrison Ford, and the de-aging special effects were pretty amazing. I'd say they're about 98% of the way there with that technology, and in the next couple of years, you're not going to be able to tell at all. And obviously, we know in this, Harrison Ford isn't that age anymore, so your brain obviously knows it's not real no matter how good the effect is. But I think as far as just objectively looking at it, if somebody didn't know that Harrison Ford was 80 years old, it would be a completely believable effect. The only times I thought it sort of broke down were a couple of moments in the movie where he quickly turned sideways or the camera was shaking a lot. In a couple of those shots, for only a brief moment, it didn't look like him anymore. But seriously, the majority of that effect looked absolutely amazing. Really well done. There's also some really great emotional scenes in the movie, which I won't give away, but I thought were really well done and touching and made me engage with the characters and care about the outcome of the story for them. The movie also has some great action scenes, although I admit this is a bit of a mixed reaction, because during those scenes, despite the fact that they were really well choreographed and had some really creative parts and were well executed, I found I didn't really feel engaged. And by that I mean my heart rate wasn't up at all. I should have been on the edge of my seat and excited, but instead, while it was visually interesting to watch, I felt no real danger for the characters. And I think this could partly be because for certain parts of it, they were calmly talking back and forth throughout a lot of the scenes. And it sort of sucks the urgency and the danger out of the scene when they do that. Also, it's very heavily CG, and because of that, I get pulled out of the story and I start evaluating the special effects. I had this exact same problem with the recent Flash movie. This is opposed to something like the Mission Impossible series or John Wick or the new Top Gun, where I know Tom Cruise and, what's his name? Totally blanking. John Wick. Keanu Reeves. Where I know Tom Cruise and Keanu Reeves do most of their own stunts, or they're actually in the planes and they're experiencing real G-forces, and they're in actual danger just by shooting those scenes. But here's my biggest criticism of the new Indiana Jones movie. Now, remember, I like the film, okay? So these are secondary considerations. I think you should go see it because I thought it was pretty solid. I liked it. But that being said, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, this technically isn't actually an Indiana Jones movie. What it is a Helena Shaw, or Phoebe Waller-Bridge movie, which prominently features and involves Indiana Jones. And I mean this in the most basic storytelling way. For example, she pretty much drives all the decisions in the movie. Indy just gets pulled along for the ride. Now, it is about a relic he had interacted with years ago, but the story is her story. I still liked it a lot, but it's not purely an Indiana Jones movie. And there's a story in there for him too, and well, he's Indiana Jones, so he's not exactly a background character at all, but I think if you watch closely, you'll see he's actually not the main character driving the story. She is. And you might say, what's wrong with that? Well, nothing. As I said, I really liked the story they told. I thought there were some really great parts and some parts that were really touching, and I enjoyed the way the whole story played out. Lots of great creative decisions. It's a little bait and switchy for me, and that's the problem I've had with a lot of the recent intellectual property offerings lately. To bring this topic around to the theme of this channel, I find this fascinating because it's really interesting to me to see what these huge entertainment companies are doing with the intellectual properties they've paid so much to acquire. It's almost like their entire idea is to retire and reboot most of them with new characters instead of continuing with the legacy characters that made the properties so successful in the first place. And I find that to be a little cocky.
Don't get cocky!
But let me be very clear, I think they have the absolute right to do whatever they want. They paid dearly to acquire these properties. I just question the wisdom of replacing the old with the new just so you can infuse it with new characters and at the cost of the popularity of the franchise itself. Now look, I said earlier, Harrison Ford's 80 years old. He probably needs to be retired. He's not going to be doing any more Indiana Jones movies. And when I first heard about this movie being made at all, I initially questioned why even make this movie in the first place. Now, having seen it, I think it's a solid entry into the franchise, even if I don't feel like it's technically an Indiana Jones movie. They just called it that to get butts in the seats. And of all the franchise revisit attempts I've seen, I actually think this one might be the best in that it does give the legacy character his due, and there are some really great scenes with him. I thought the denouement scene was especially great. It's time for another episode of Fun with French. Today's word is denouement. Denouement. It's spelled denouement. D-E-N-O-U-E-M-E-N-T, which comes from the French root word nouer, which means to tie or knot. So a denouement is the unraveling of a narrative's plot or the resolution of the story's main conflict. And now let's return to our loquacious host. It's time for another episode of Loving Latin. Today's word is loquacious. Loquacious, spelled L-O-Q-U-A-C-I-O-U-S. Loquacious means full of speech or talkative. It comes from the Latin word loqui, which means to speak. So someone who is loquacious is someone who talks a lot. It can be used to describe people who are chatty or verbose, and our show host certainly is that. Let's return to the episode now in progress. But I'd say this movie is 49% Indiana Jones and 51% Helena Shaw. And again, nothing wrong with that, except the title of the movie is Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, not Helena Shaw and the Dial of Destiny, also featuring Indiana Jones. Look, I think Phoebe is a great actress and a great writer, and I think she's been very successful thus far, and I'm sure she will be in the future. I just love Indiana Jones, and I was hoping for an Indiana Jones movie, and I appreciated the role he played in this one, but somehow it didn't feel like it was really focused on him. He was there in the picture to be sure, and he had his moments. It just felt focused elsewhere. And I really feel that if actors and actresses and scriptwriters and producers really want to establish their qualifications and prove their abilities, they do a disservice to themselves by just piggybacking on already established, successful intellectual properties and trying to shoehorn their own characters into them. Look, I'm not aware if they're even planning a new series of movies or a television show based around Helena Shaw, but I'd be very curious to see how that show would stand on its own two legs without the help of Indy there to prop it up. Maybe it'll be great. I'm just saying it's unknown to me, and I'm skeptical that the audience for that show will be nearly as big as the one that already exists for Indy. So do your own thing, new people of Hollywood. That's all I'm saying. Just piggybacking off already successful stuff just makes you look weak and incapable of coming up with your own original ideas.
Your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could that they didn't stop to think if they should.
All right, so for one last time, let me just reiterate this here for the millionth time. I liked the movie. I recommend you go see it. And if you do leave a comment in the comment section about your thoughts, maybe I can do a follow-up on this after a little while and we see how the box office is, and I can address some of your comments at that time as well. One of the other things to that point that the people I went with noticed was that the very first screening of this movie at 3 o'clock in the afternoon at the Chinese Theater in downtown Hollywood was not nearly full. So that's a little concerning for the success of the movie. Now, maybe that'll correct itself over the weekend, but we'll come back to this later and see how it did. Okay, the second thing I want to talk about is this. I need your feedback. I need to know who's watching, and I need to get any input from you that you might have. If you're watching this episode still, do me a solid and like the video, the little thumbs up guy below the video window there, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Equally important, and even if you think I know who you are and I know you're watching these episodes, tell me your first name and where you're watching from in the comments, and tell me any thoughts you might have about the channel and where we're headed. Last week I posted the first official episode, and it was all about the Apple Vision Pro, so maybe tell me what you thought of that episode or leave your comments about that. Since then, I've had several other ideas about future episodes that I think I could do that would provide for some interesting discussion. These would probably be more long-term project episodes that I'll just put up whenever I can get them done because they're going to take a lot of research and editing and input to get done by me, and there's no way I'll be able to do them in a 7-day span. But here's a couple of ideas that I had, for example. The original Star Wars, the movie that came out in 1977, is the best Star Wars. I know that is an intentionally controversial position, and I have reasons for saying it that way. It's a little bit clickbaity, I'll admit that right now. But I do actually think that, and I think it would be fun to discuss that in light of all the new Star Wars stuff that's come out since the initial movie. I'd also like to do an overview of Elon Musk and all the companies he's started and the direction and the future that he sees for humanity and why he seems to be so misunderstood by some people. I'm looking at you, Scott Phillips. Another one I wanted to do is a breakdown of the movie, the Top Gun movie, Maverick. I know this movie has been out for a while now, but hear me out. So I recently watched a couple of reaction videos on YouTube of people watching that movie for the first time. And I noticed that there were some interesting and fascinating reactions that seemed to be due to what I would describe as maybe generational differences. And I thought it might be fun to do a 3-panel breakdown where you can see myself and then the 2 other people watching the movie. And then I'll stop at certain times, give my thoughts on the scene, and then we can listen to their reactions. And you'll see why it was so interesting to me. Just some very interesting reactions to scenes that were very different from what I was thinking and feeling during that part of the movie. So I thought that might be a fascinating episode to do. Another idea is something on the latest in the medical mission to increase longevity in humans and positively alter our DNA. This is science fiction level stuff, and a lot of it is happening without a whole lot of attention from the media. But it's really incredible. Certainly scary, just like all powerful technologies. But some of the things that they're figuring out and are starting to be able to do, I think in the next 10 to 20 years, we're going to look back and what we know then is going to just blow our minds. Absolutely blow our minds. So I want to do an episode on that. And then the final idea, which is related, is about the growing number of language-based AI software that's been coming out lately. Yesterday, I spent about an hour and a half chatting with a relatively new AI called Pi, P-I. You can look up the app on the either the OS or the Android App Store. It's free to download. It's truly, you guessed it, fascinating. And I think there's a lot to talk about there, and the good and the bad. So let me know if there's any other ideas you'd like to see me cover. I think that's it for this week. I want to hear your reaction to the channel and if there's anything you'd like to see in the future. Oh yeah, I want to give a shout out to these fine peeps, Justin and Autumn Hilden. They're the ones who encouraged me to start this channel, and so I wanted to give them a shout out. Actually, this picture is from the dinner we had up at the smokehouse up in Burbank, but they were the first people to really encourage me to do this channel, and I wanted to give them a personal thank you and shout out. They've been very encouraging since I started, and so I really appreciate them and their friendship. Also to my friend Shamir Shiraz, who's been watching the show consistently. Shamir loves Baby Yoda and Babu Frick for unknown reasons. Okay, they're cute, I admit it. But he's obviously slightly crazy. But he's a friend, and I wanted to give him a shout out as well. If you watch through the last 3 episodes and look very carefully, you can find a single frame featuring a little image of Babu Frick and Baby Yoda somewhere in the episode. If you blink, you'll miss it, but there is one in this episode and the last 2 prior to this. I need to further give a shout out to my good friend, J. Scott Phillips. J standing for Jeff, so he has a great first name. He has his own really interesting, dare I say, fascinating YouTube channel where he reviews books and gives lessons on the various illustrators. He's an illustrator himself, and so he gives sort of a history and background to the illustrators who've contributed to the books that he's reviewing. He's also a real pain in the sometimes, but golly gee willikers, I like the guy. So check out his channel and give him some love too. I'll put it down below in the description. He was also somebody who inspired me to do this channel. I thought to myself, if even someone like Scott Phillips can make a YouTube channel, surely I can as well. So thanks, Scott. I really appreciate it. Okay, that's it. Don't forget to leave some ideas in the comments section in case I didn't mention that before 10,000 times for subjects you'd like me to explore. For example, the history of cotton candy, or why is the English language so silly sometimes, or what's 6 plus 12 plus cats plus lasagna, or why is the answer to the universe 42?